Today, I'm going to be doing some sewing. I'm going to be working on a project for my kid, small clothing, and it will be easier to do. I broke down some of clothes from my kid already for a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and I'm taking those patterns and turning them into a custom outfit. I will be cutting out stuff, I will be painting, and I will be stitching everything by hand, so you get to see the whole process. I start by laying out the fabric and placing the cutouts on top. These act as patterns for the clothes. I line everything up carefully because I want to give myself enough seam allowance, and if they shift a little too much, it won't fit later. Once I'm happy with the placement, I start trimming around each piece, cutting them out one by one. First, I start with the shorts. Again, making sure everything's dialed in. Then I move on to the top. Every little cut brings the shape closer to life. It's slow and detailed work, but it makes handmade products actually come to life. I'm not a sewer. Everybody else in my family is. I'm the one who wasn't very interested, so everything I know is from secondhand smoke. All the same, before sewing, I want to add a design. So I use Post-it notes to block out the shapes of brush strokes because I wanted them to be just thick enough where I could see how they would align. I also wanted these brush strokes to go from the shirt all the way down to the shorts so it looks like a cohesive thought. So putting in Post-it notes really helped me with that. Then I mixed up some paint. I added some solution to the paint to make it washable in a washing machine after this, so that's a very important step. I then started brushing paint strokes onto the fabric. I used black just because it's an easy color for me to use for other projects, and I didn't want them to be perfectly aligned. I wanted it to feel kind of rough. If it was just straight lines, it would have felt like pinstripes. So I wanted it to have that childless wonder of it just being roughly brushed on, so it gave me a lot of room to make mistakes, which is great. I stopped the line right about at chest height so the design felt balanced and it looked like I wasn't just painting lines on fabric, it actually was designed. Watching just the plain one color fabric transform into like a fun design was a lot of fun for this project and certainly unique. Now I started stitching. For the first, I sewed up the bottom hemline of the shorts, giving them a nice clean edge. After that, I moved on for the inside seam and stitched up the inside. A bit by bit, these shorts definitely were taking shape. And of course, not everything goes perfectly. At one point, I realized I messed up the center seam. The stitches weren't supposed to be there, so I had to rip them out by hand and undo that work. It's frustrating, but it's a part of the process. Mistakes happen. Fixing them and when to fix them makes the final piece stronger. So once I repaired that, I had everything done for now for the shorts, and I was ready to move on to the next piece. Next, I got to move on to the shirt. I started to work on the bottom seam again folding it under and stitching up in place. I did a rolling seam, so on the back side it would also look really clean cut. Folding it under and stitching it up into place. I know my stitches look so bad, but I don't sew regularly. This is a project I never thought I would do, so understand that this is not a skill a muscle that I work. This is not something I regularly do. So the stitches are going to be a little janked. Let's just call it what it is. After that, I connected the shoulder seams, which was the next step I needed to take to be able to give the shirt structure and be able to get the sleeves in. Sleeves are the hardest part. They're a weird shape. Even when you go with a pattern off of a clothing piece, they can still not be aligned. I always have tried to just give myself a lot of seam allowance. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but at least I have a little bit of seam. Thankfully, I did that with these shoulder pieces, so I did have just enough to sew everything up. But if I didn't grant myself a little bit more fabric, I would have been done for. I also didn't have any pins for this, which makes shoulders a lot harder. So I would definitely suggest you have pins if you're going to be working with this, but I'm just working with the needle and thread. It is satisfying once you get the sleeves in, since it's finally neatly in place and it does look like a structured shirt. The shirt is actually starting to look like something that I would put my kid in. Now, bringing everything together with both pieces sewn, I lay them out together. They look great, but I need to finish the collar of this shirt. So I cut the fabric stripe, fold it carefully, realize it's too fat, fold it again, and sew it along the neckline. Then I tuck it down, and I realize I sewed it in reverse. So I flipped it back down again, and I tacked it in place to make it a French seam. So then if somebody was to turn it inside out, they wouldn't see frayed edges. It's just what worked for the collar. I made a mistake. I didn't want to have to re-sew the collar all back on again. So again, it's not about that I didn't make mistakes. It's just the fact that I pivoted in a way to make it work for me. Sometimes you have to rip stuff out. Sometimes you can just pivot completely and make it become a better design. The last detail was the drawstring for the shorts. I cut a long strip of fabric and sewed that whole thing up, and then I needed to turn it inside out. So I actually used a chopstick for that. It is a nice little trick to push the fabric through to turn it right side out. It hides the raw edges and everything. It does take a little fuss, so definitely be okay with it taking a little finesse, but a chopstick or something like that does help a lot. You can also attach a safety pin to the end and push the safety pin through. I just didn't have a safety pin, so I couldn't use that tactic. Chopstick worked. I had that. With the strap ready, I tied the ends and put it through the waistband, and just like that, the shorts were also done and everything was completed. And honestly, that's it. The project was done. A hand-painted, hand-sewn, matching set of shorts and shirt that were totally made from scratch, using from clothes that my kid didn't want to wear anymore and broken down into my patterns. From painting to stitching, it all came together pretty well. I like working on small projects like this, like physically small, because it gives you a short amount of time to have something completed. The sewing line that you're doing doesn't seem like it's going to go on forever like it does for adult clothes. I liked that I got to paint on this stuff, and it gave some more personality than just having a flat color. And as much as the stitches do look silly, it is kind of part of the story, I guess. Thanks for watching me build this, and I hope it inspires you to make your own handmade product.